Buford here. I got Mr. Erik Kramer, Mr. Wildcat. Thank you for your time. Thanks for making time for us, big guy.
Of course. Thank you.
In-state Wolfpack.
Yeah.
Well, I got it wrong. What's that? Wildcat. It's the NC State Wolfpack.
NC State Wolfpack.
Wolfpack.
One of the very few nicknames out there that doesn't end in an S.
There you go. Okay, so it's not plural then. It's not plural.
No.
How'd you end up in NC State? Kind of briefly.
I'm from here.
You're from Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long way away from home.
It is. So I ended up not getting recruited to play football out of high school.
Okay.
So I went to Pierce Junior College.
Okay.
And I didn't grow up. I grew up over near the school, actually.
Okay.
And then we had a pretty good season my second year. It was the only year I played. And then from there, I ended up getting a scholarship back to NC State. And had a good couple years there. And so I thought that's where my career would end, actually.
Well, so let's touch on that. Talk about draft day. I mean, where were you when you got the phone call? What was that? You said you thought that was where your career was ending. Let's talk about that. How did that happen, and where were you, and what were your expectations once you got drafted?
A, I didn't get drafted. B, they had 12 rounds back then.
Right.
They could have had 124 rounds. You know?
Okay.
So I just, I remember, interestingly, I got a call from Tampa Bay, and it was around, that was back when Ray Perkins was their coach.
Okay.
And this was back around round 10 or 11.
Okay.
And he said, hey, we're thinking of drafting either you or Mike Shula.
Okay.
And it ended up they drafted Shula.
Right.
And I went to New Orleans as an undrafted free agent.
Okay.
And then got cut there and waited around. No one else called. So that was, I went back to school.
Okay.
And then to finish up my degree, this is 1987. Mm-hmm. So that's the last year the players in the NFL went on strike.
Okay, that's right. So the Scabs wouldn't play.
I was the Scab.
You was the Scab for the Falcons?
For the Falcons, right.
Okay,
right.
I remember that.
And one of my claims to fame, I guess you'd call it, is eventually I was the last Scab actively playing.
Actively, okay.
So in 1999 was the last year that I played in the NFL. So
that was that's wild. I remember that. Everybody went on strike, and I told my pops, this is my opportunity. I was a junior in high school, and they said anybody can go try out.
Pretty much.
I had my shoes, I had my bag. I was going to head down to the Kingdom to try out for the Seattle Seahawks. He's like, you can't play with the men. Those are grown men out there. You can't play. I won't let you try out. I was like, they said on TV anybody can try out. I want to go down to try out. So that's funny that he was. Anybody call you a Scab to this day?
No, it's been so long now. I don't know that there was anybody alive back then that was still kicking around today. So,
okay.
Anyway, but yeah, that was an interesting part of the journey.
So tell me about then that aha moment. There must have been a moment where you was like, I'm in the NFL. I got a uniform on. I'm in the NFL. Did that happen with the Falcons? Did that happen with the Lions?
I'd say it happened with the Falcons, not in the Scab games, because there was only 3 of those. Right. But
the power of the NFL that quickly, once they said the games counted, players quickly got into camp then.
Yep. And so what happened was there was 3 games, and then the Rams was the 3rd game we played. Okay. And by that time, their whole team had crossed. Okay. So we beat them. Okay. And we had no one cross. Okay. So that was sort of when I got called in. I was the only guy that they kept on that. Now I didn't play any that season, but I remember getting called up to Marion Campbell. Was the head coach for the Falcons then. I remember getting called up to his office thinking, okay, I'm going to turn in my playbook like everyone else. Right. And he was like, no, you're staying. So I remember going outside, walking through the parking lot, because at that time, I don't know where their facility is now, but their football facility was like you walk across the parking lot and there's a hotel that they also owned. Okay. And so that's where we were staying. Okay. And so I remember walking across that parking lot, and seeing like the cars of like Gerald Riggs and some of these other guys that have been around a while, that here they're coming now, and I got my little yellow '70 VW Volkswagen over there, thinking, with the rusted out floorboard in the back.
Oh,
right?
wow.
Thinking, all right, this is pretty cool.
There's a little difference there, huh?
Yeah. But that year I got to travel, with the team. I didn't suit up for any games or anything, but I got to travel, and so it was a good experience.
Sure. What's the best lesson you learned through that experience? I mean, because you still had an NFL career ahead of you. Mm-hmm. What was some of the best or the best lesson, if you could mention it, if it was one or two, that you learned
I'll tell you, the best lesson out of that whole thing was following that strike year in '88, I ended up getting cut. I was the last player cut. And so, again, I waited around for some teams thinking I'd get a phone call. Never happened. Mm-hmm. So there was a team in Canada that had my rights.
Okay.
So I actually went up and played the last 6 games of that season in 1988.
Okay.
Came back for the '89 season, and we had an inter-squad scrimmage.
Okay.
And the coach at that time decided to make it live on everybody.
Okay.
And on the third play of that scrimmage, I blew out my left posterior cruciate knee ligament. So my season was over.
Okay.
So after that season, I called around to all the NFL teams, and one team called me back, and that was the Lions.
Really?
And so somehow they flew me out, and I tried out and ended up getting signed, and that's what showed me, like, okay, if you want to force your way in the door, you can do it. So
you had to force your way in the door. That's what you see. That another sign of resiliency. Kind of what we were talking about earlier.
Right.
That's pretty interesting. So you played with the Falcons, obviously with the Lions and the Bears. Mm-hmm. Who was the best player you played with?
That's a short list.
Is it?
I would say Barry Sanders.
I was looking at the list, and was it pretty amazing to watch him play?
Because we had 2 running plays. Draw to the right, draw to the left, and a slant off tackle one way or the other. And we didn't have a tight end. So it was 4 wide receivers and Barry Sanders.
I thought that was innovation. You had the talent to do it because you had, if I remember correctly, you had Moore on one side, Herman Moore, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I can't remember the receiver on the other side, but
Willie Green and Herman Moore, and then inside we had another guy, Brett Perryman, is really
Brett
good.
Perryman, there you go, whose son plays to this day.
Right.
You split him wide, and you don't need a fullback for Barry. Mm-hmm. Give him the ball and let him run.
Well, right. So after I had left, '93 was my last year there. And I think the following year, the new coach was Bobby Ross.
Yeah.
And he tried to bring in and run a traditional fullback and all that, and Bear was like, what? So
the best
thing you do is hand the ball off to him, not block anybody,
and let him go
one-on-one.
Yeah. Wayne Fontes got a lot of crap for that. Running that run and shoot style offense, because it was, at the time, nobody had heard of it. Like, what are you doing? You don't have a fullback. What are you doing? You're just going to get this guy killed. But that was using his talent. He got a lot of crap for that, but if I remember correctly, that was some of his better seasons was because he was picking up big yardage. So that's pretty impressive. Now, you play with some good coaches or some good players. I was thinking Jesse Tuggle and Gerald Riggs. I don't know where they were on your list.
Jesse was a rookie. So I believe he was an undrafted free agent also.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For the Falcons.
Okay.
He played a long time.
Okay. Yeah.
And I never got to play with Riggs because I was only there that 1 year. Didn't play when the regulars came back.
Okay.
But I would say, if I'm not mistaken, Gerald, I think, was on that Washington team that beat us when I was with Detroit in the '91 NFC Championship game.
Slaughter.
Then
that was a slaughter.
We got smoked.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then they went on to beat Buffalo
in the Super Bowl.
That's the Super Bowl that Thurman Thomas couldn't find his helmet for.
Right. I remember that. Coaches, you mentioned Marion Campbell. Mm-hmm. We talked about Wayne Fontes. I think Wayne Fontes was. I think he got a bad short end of the stick. In fact, are you the last quarterback to lead the Lions to a playoff victory?
I think so.
That's pretty impressive.
That's been a while, but yeah.
It's been a long time, but that's pretty impressive.
They don't have a long string.
Well, they had Erik Kramer, and that means they got them to a playoffs, right? Congratulations.
Yeah.
But you also played for Wannstedt, man, and Dick Geron. Like, how was that demoralizing? I mean,
So I know. Okay, so I didn't play for Coach Geron. I played for my 5 years in Detroit, Chicago. Were all for Dave Wannstedt. Yeah. Now I think Dave. To me, I think he gets a bad rap.
Do you?
Even within the team. A lot of the players in the team did not respect him. I don't know why, but he always treated me fairly. And I think he, to me, because he came, out of that Jimmy Johnson. He was at Miami when they won national championships. He won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys there, and that's how he got the job with the Bears. So they were doing the same thing in Dallas that we were doing.
I know
they had a little better players than we had.
He coached my Dolphins. I hated him. I didn't like anything he did down there in Miami. I mean, I can go through a whole list of stuff, but this isn't about me. I'm talking to Erik Kramer here.
I'm saying
I was not a fan of Dave Wannstedt, and so I just wanted to know somebody who played for him.
Here's another one.
I know. I just want to know is somebody who played for him what that was like. That must have been.
I think he was. Like I said, he was fair with me. Anytime he wanted to make a decision on something, I was not the last to know. I was the first to know.
Okay.
So he was very upfront about things, and that's even coming from a guy who I was brought there to be the starting quarterback, which is for an undrafted free agent. You go all the way back to the beginning. That was pretty amazing. But then I separated my shoulder that same year I came in '94, like 4 or 5 games in, and lost the job to Steve Walsh. So even when I was healthy enough to play, I wasn't playing.
Right. Okay.
And in that off season, he said, "Look, we're going to have an open competition between you and Steve, and may the better guy win."
Right.
So that was fine with me.
Okay.
And I just the way everything worked out, I think I felt bad. In his case, that I ended up having a couple, one severe neck injury there that derailed my season in '96 after only about, a handful of games.
Okay.
So I think that he could have been helped out with better talent. Had he had the same talent in Dallas? Or in Chicago that Dallas had? Or anything close to it?
I could have coached a team in Dallas. Come on now.
I'll grant you that. I'll grant you they were stacked.
Yeah. What was your lasting memory from your time in the NFL? Do you have? Can you narrow down a few? I mean, it was probably so many, but
I think going back to that year in Detroit when we went to the NFC Championship game, right? So that was,
and you beat the Cowboys.
We beat the Cowboys to get there.
Yeah,
and that was the last time they lost in the playoffs before they won Super Bowl. And but that experience to me of going to Washington and literally landing in Washington or whatever airport that was, and then getting the police escort, like multiple police escorts, like to the hotel. That was impressive. Like there was people, as we're getting on the freeway, there's a car coming up alongside, and this one cop came up alongside and was like, "Get the hell back!" And then, as we get into the city, they were already waiting for us. So they got this street blocked off, and the bus driver never put his foot on the brake going through town.
Driving right into the stadium.
That was impressive. That was
that's pretty cool.
Well organized.
Right. Yeah, that's how they do it. I've seen that happen here for the Rams and get to the stadium early enough for different Chargers teams or their competitors there. Actually, drivers drive in. Let's talk a little bit about life after football. Had some tragic experience, most people would say. Your son, Griffin, kind of overdose. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Do you care to share about that?
Of course.
Did you see anything leading up to that, or was that all of a sudden?
It was not an all of a sudden.
Okay.
So Griffin had he had been in drug rehab in high school.
Okay.
So this started back around his sophomore year in high school got interrupted by having to go to drug rehab.
Okay.
And then that was about a 3-month inpatient situation. He transitioned from being an inpatient to being an outpatient. So he lived at home, and I was married at the time. And so he lived at home with us, but then I would take him every day to this outpatient program. And he spent the majority of his day there and evening. And so it was around the time that he was going to be transitioning out of that into back into life again. And so, yeah, it was. So he transitioned out of the outpatient program. I want to say it was around the end of January or early February 2011. And then his overdose happened October 30th, 2011, so later that same year. And I could kind of tell as he was transitioning out, those last maybe 2 or 3 months, where he went from somebody who was like in amongst people like him, kids like him, where there was like a once a week meeting, right, with these kids and whoever their parents were, all in one room.
Sure.
And Griffin would kind of voluntarily say things, as some other kids would, that made me think, wow, who knows, he's got a chance here, I think. And then towards the end of it, he became much more closed up. And I remember him making a comment one time saying, I just want to be able to do what normal high school kids do. Party a little bit, whatever. And internally, I said, well, what, in this regard, what has been normal ever about your life? So he had an issue where if you start that, once you've stopped it, you start that again. That mental process starts before you ever take anything.
Right.
That to me signaled some, this is not a good situation.
Was and I know you can't get into his head, you can't diagnose kind of what his thinking was, but from your perspective, did he suffer the pressures of kind of your successes and your accomplishments that maybe you feel he couldn't live up to some of that? Was that kind of part of that, do you think?
I get that impression, or got that impression back then. Yeah, at some points in time along the way in his life, I think that's something he did experience. I think so because I coached his youth football team, and every now and then he would make a comment to me about how somebody, usually on his own team, would make a comment to him in some negative fashion, and so I think there was a bit of that.
It's tough playing for your dad.
Around with.
It's tough playing for your pops. I played for my pops, and he wasn't nice to me. I don't know how you was with them, but he wasn't nice to me on the field. And he said we talked to him about it hundreds of times, and he said he was being extra mean with me on the field because he didn't want to give the impression that I'm only out there because of my dad's out there.
Right.
And I didn't like it. Luckily, it was only for 1 year I played for him because I didn't particularly care for that. And it was, my dad was just a guy around the city. He wasn't an NFL star, but he wanted to send a message.
Right.
And I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong. So, like, why are you trying to send a message? I'm just playing the game.
I know. That's tough. You'd have to ask Dylan now if I was like that, but I don't get.
Were they close? Were they and there's an age difference?
Yeah, there is. They were like just 2 weeks shy of being 5 years apart.
Okay.
So I think Dylan is now 22. Griffin would have been 27. And it was around that time. It was maybe, I don't know, within that last year that Dylan began to notice a shift in Griffin.
Okay.
To where Griffin wasn't just the big older bully brother. He was now kind of taking Dylan under his wing a little bit.
Okay.
Until he wasn't here anymore.
Wow.
But so I think that for Dylan was heartbreaking in the sense that not only did he lose his brother, he lost a brother that was on his way back.
Right. So that had to be tough on you as a parent. But then, not too long after that, your mom passed.
Yeah. She had it was the Mother's Day of that in 2011 that Dylan and I and her went to go play golf. And she, afterward, as we're walking to the car, she says, I've got to go get this test results back tomorrow on whatever. What? Like what? And she said, it's nothing. And then she called me later that next day and said she's got stage 4 uterine cancer. So,
just all of a sudden. Huh?
Yeah, out of the blue.
Right.
And so, anyway, she had to go through a very radical surgery. Survived it, and then, but eventually it returned, and later so Dylan passed, or Griffin, passed away in late October of 2011. My mom passed away in July of 2012.
Yeah, so less than a year there.
Yeah.
So is that those kind of back-to-back situations, did that kind of send you in a dark space, or is that kind of what
I think
threw
that
you
was
off the rails a little bit?
Yeah, I would say there was a sadness that happened then that really in Griffin's case, because he was 18 at the time.
Sure.
Nobody wants to see their parents pass away, but my mom was 67.
Yeah.
But it was really in her last stages that she and I got to be more close.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, it was a very sad time. But then around the time my mom passed away, my dad then got, he had an untreated, I think it's called acid reflux, that turned into esophageal cancer. And so he was on his slow, steady decline by then.
Wow.
As well.
Yeah, wow. So it's kind of a culmination of things, right?
Right. And so it was around, I'd say, maybe April or May of 2015, I think is when it started to kind of hit me a little bit in terms of a certain depression set in that I couldn't really. Once that happens, you can't really get out of it. At least I couldn't.
The depression set in about May after your mom and your father passed?
So my mom passed away in July 2012.
Okay.
My dad, so now we're into 2015.
Okay.
So my dad was really kind of very down, very near death at that point.
So that was a gradual thing with your pops.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, it was around that time, of like May-ish, where I fell into very deep.
Like something that kind of could find some kind of joy in your life at the time, or was it just difficult to find that?
Despite you not being a doctor, that's a really good question. So, yeah, golf is something I've always enjoyed doing, and but even that,
Just wasn't.
I had no motivation to go. When I was there, I had every motivation to leave, and it's hard talking. It's not hard, but not hard emotionally, but it's hard grasping what I felt from back then because I no longer feel that way. And so, yeah, it was just a sort of a dark, bleak. There was no positive thoughts. There wasn't one positive second I would have during a day. So waking up, there was nothing to wake up and look forward to.
Right.
And I don't even, there wasn't one second a day where I wasn't conflicted about something.
Mental health is a real challenge, obviously, and I guess sometimes people, and I can speak for myself, where I didn't really believe in it until it started impacting myself. And I felt a sense of depression. I felt, for lack of better words, loss and negative spirits in my head or whatever. I remember a time where I'm a huge football fan, have been since as long as I can remember. But there was an AFC Championship game. The Jets are playing the Patriots, and I would cook breakfast, typically go to church, cook breakfast, come home, and just enjoy the game. But I could not enjoy the game. If the game was on, I could turn it on, and I just couldn't sit and watch the game. I'll start walking around the house. I start walking up and down the street. I had to leave the house. The game, and I knew it was a problem because there's an AFC Championship game going on. The Super Bowl's in a couple of weeks, and I could not enjoy that. So I knew that was an issue, and
that's a language that I understand.
Yeah,
I could be sitting here, and I want to sit there. As soon as I got there, I want to sit there. As soon as I sat there, I want to be walking outside or whatever.
Yeah,
wherever I wasn't the right spot.
It was an eerie feeling, and I mean, I went to a psychiatrist, and they offered me a bunch of pills. On my way to the psychiatrist, they told me, I'm thinking in my head, watch this guy offer me some different prescriptions. And I was there 15 minutes, and he offered me, sure enough, I can hear 3 things I can offer you. I'm like, dude, this isn't going to work for me. Like, just take, I'm good, popping pills. And it was kind of, it took about that 3 months period before I got to his office that I kind of snapped out of it, because I just wasn't going to pop any pills just to get myself better. So I can kind of understand where you're coming from. But Eric, I mean, you took this to a whole nother level. You went to a hotel, checked in, and I mean, you actually put a gun to your head. Do you remember that? Do you remember that physical situation? And I don't mean to. I'm not trying to rehash some trauma in your life, but I mean that was serious.
Yeah. Just let me put this straight right now. There's no question you can ask me that I'm going to get offended by or don't want to talk about. I've talked about my suicide attempt publicly to my own high school now, or other groups of people, in hopes of relating to people like this stuff happens.
Cam Buford, voice of the fans. I got my man Erik Kramer with me. We're talking about real life situations, real life stuff, and I'm just trying to ask him questions so it can help somebody else who might be enduring the same thing. So I'm gonna be honest with you as I can, and I appreciate your honesty, Eric. Great. So, voice of the fans, that's what we're here. That's what we're doing. So that situation. I mean, you drove to the hotel. You checked into the hotel. Like, why not do it at home? Like, what? I mean.
So here's how my mind was working at that time.
Okay, let's hear it.
That I felt like I didn't want my son Dylan to come home to that.
Okay.
And he wasn't even living here at the time. He was living with his mom. But that's just what I thought. That's the one thought that made sense.
Okay.
And not a lot at that time made sense.
Sure.
And if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't do it over again.
Okay.
Certainly, this is not a prescription. Me surviving a gunshot wound to the head is no prescription to get rid of for anybody else to get rid of depression.
Okay.
But since that day, I haven't been. And but now you also have to remember there was a couple years in there where I don't really have much memory of.
Well,
only by talking to people that were around during my recovery, do I even. They have to fill me in on my own life.
What's going on? But I want to get back to the moment, and if you could take me right up to the. Are you a gun owner? Were you a gun owner at the time? You went to the Walmart, picked one up, and said, "This ought to do it." Like, as bad as I feel, Eric, I'm not going to harm myself.
Right.
I don't want to take the vaccine shot because I don't like. I don't want to take a needle. But I'm just saying, like, did you, what? Okay, you pulled the trigger, and then you're alive. But did you? Did you? Are you a gun owner? Are you? Were you a gun owner at the time? You went to the Walmart, picked one up, and said, "This ought to do it." Like, as bad as I feel, Eric, I'm not going to harm myself. I'm not going to take the vaccine shot because I don't like. I don't want to take a needle. But I'm just saying, like,
Apparently so. Yeah.
Did you feel like, I mean, like, what did that feel like to still be alive after you try to end it? Like,
I don't know.
You can't remember that. You don't remember that. Okay.
So I will say that what I do remember is that so I remember going to that hotel, and I remember being in that room, and what I don't remember though is making any phone calls or text messages, which apparently I did.
Okay.
And so it was actually a friend of mine who was he was a police officer, and he ended up getting that text and apparently called over to his station mates nearby.
Okay.
And I guess I had texted him what hotel I was at.
Okay.
So
Okay.
he called my cell phone afterward.
Okay.
And apparently I picked up.
Mm.
And he said, and I haven't had a chance to speak with him afterward. And apparently he said, if there's anything in your hand, drop it. And he said, there's people outside your door waiting for you.
Right.
So apparently I got up and walked out.
Talk to me about your relationship with Anna Durkin.
Yeah. So that's one person who has been pivotal in all of this. She's somebody I went to high school with, and we've been friends ever since. And anyway, she's the one who eventually, I don't know who called her. I'm going to guess it was my sister or somebody. And so she tried to find me at some hospital. Had no idea where to look. And I don't know how she found me, but she did. And so she stayed with me in the hospital for quite a while. Because I think I was in a coma for about 6 or so weeks. And eventually I started, I guess I went from one hospital to another, and she was instrumental in helping to orchestrate all that. And eventually I found myself at Center for Neuroskills, which is a brain trauma rehab clinic over in Encino. So she helped coordinate everything, helped coordinate all of my, like they had a rehab center that we would be driven to, but I also had, there was a home that they also owned that I was living at as well. So it was 24-hour care. And so she was very helpful she would show up every day which I don't even remember, but she did.
Right.
At this rehab facility.
So in reading the story, she seemed, as you mentioned, pivotal. She was kind of important in this next portion. Before we take a break, though, I want to ask you about: do you think, or do you believe CTE played a portion in any of this? Are you a believer in CTE? Do you believe that the trauma maybe that you experienced playing NFL football played a portion into that depression?
It could have.
Okay.
It could have.
Okay.
I won't rule it out.
Okay.
My son's a believer that it does. That it is a contributing factor.
Okay.
I certainly can't rule it out. I just I've heard stories of guys that are former players. It doesn't matter what sport, but will end up walking into a room and forget while they're even in there. So that kind of thing didn't happen to me. But I have had subsequently, and even prior to my gunshot wound, had some, I guess it's like a brain mapping. And it shows signs of some concussions in there.
Okay. Do you remember being concussed as a player?
No. Well, in high school,
Okay.
I got knocked out on a play,
Okay.
but
Seen the stars and.
I don't remember. I was knocked out. So, but obviously, over all that time, you can have a concussion and not know it.
Right.
It's kind of the invisible injury.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I want to ask you that. I want to see if that kind of. I was very, very curious through the neuro hospitals that you've been to and the neuro doctors that you've seen. Was that anybody identify that as an issue? I just was kind of curious about that.
Well, the unfortunate part is, as of today, to what I understand, CTE can only be discovered once you're passed away. Yeah. But I believe this QEEG, that's what the brain mapping is. I think that's from the doctor that I just recently went to about a couple years ago. He said he's the one that kind of got this whole thing going.
Sure.
He's up in Santa Barbara, and he's like, where it began to where it is now to where it's going to be maybe 10, 20 years from now, they're moving in the direction of being able to more pinpointedly identify areas in the brain while you're alive that are affected.
That might be good.